Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all of you who identify in other ways in terms of gender. My name is Barrett Peels. Today is Sunday, November 29th, and this is yet another episode in my series of episodes focused on my experience, not just of Vinfen Corporation, but of the healthcare system here in the state of Massachusetts. In this episode, I'm going to continue where I left off in the last episode. In the last episode, I spoke about my efforts to request a reasonable accommodation of my employer, Vinfen, by virtue of my history of having fibromyalgia. Ultimately, that request was denied, and the process itself was compromised because my healthcare provider at the time, one of my providers, incorrectly filled out the paperwork for the reasonable accommodation request that I made. I nonetheless allowed my provider to submit that information because what she submitted was in fact correct. It just was not complete. And what I mean by that is when you look at a person's medical record, you can take one piece of information out of that, share that with another person, and technically say that you have shared correct information. But is it complete information? Not if there is more that should be known, not if there is more in the medical record. This is an important thing that all healthcare providers should understand. Just because you obtain accurate information does not mean you have obtained complete information. And obtaining complete information is vital to providing effective, quality, timely, thorough care. Now, you might think based on the way I'm speaking that I am a doctor or a highly trained medical provider. I do not have that level of formal education. I do not have a Master of Public Health degree. I do not have a medical doctor degree. But I am a highly educated, intelligent, experienced, seasoned, compassionate, hardworking person. My opinion matters, my voice matters, and I have elected to share my story in an effort to not just improve my life and my prospects, but the lives of the people of Massachusetts, the functioning of the healthcare system in the state of Massachusetts, and even throughout this country. So I invite you to follow along as I continue to tell my story of my life in these last 18 months. So, picking up where I left off, in July of 2019, I was informed that my request for a reasonable accommodation was denied. As I said in the last video, I do not believe that the process that was applied to review my request for a reasonable accommodation was sufficiently interactive. When you look at the language contained in policy that was made possible through the Americans with Disabilities Act, one particular keyword should stand out, and that is interactive. When an employee requests a reasonable accommodation of an employer, they should ideally be involved in an interactive process with that employer. And in my mind, the process that was applied in my situation was not sufficiently interactive. There was not a sufficiently interactive process because there was not a substantive amount of communication through email, phone call, or in-person meetings. So, my request was denied, and I was very upset about that. I nonetheless continued to go to work for the company. And at the same time, I began the process of looking for other jobs in the company because I believed it was in my best interests to seek another job within the company that might be more suitable to my skills and needs. So I'm picking up now exactly where I left off in the calendar of events from 2019. On Wednesday, July 10th, of 2019, I disclosed my fibromyalgia diagnosis to my on-site supervisor, actually to my supervisor's supervisor, and one of the staff of human resources at the Hyannis office of Vinfen Corporation. When I made that disclosure, neither of the people present, who were Vinfen employees, asked me for an elaboration regarding my condition. While I am not aware that they may have been permitted to ask for more elaboration, I was nonetheless left concerned by the outcome of this meeting, as I had hoped for a more supportive response from Vinfen, considering the fact that I was trying my best to be responsible by discussing anything in my own background that might impact my ability to perform the functions of my position. On Friday, July 12th, my insurance company, Cigna, issued paperwork with this date noting that my employer had denied my request for accommodation. Specifically in that paperwork was the phrase, "Your employer denied your request for accommodation." The paperwork was incorrectly addressed to me at my former address in Falmouth, Massachusetts. No substantial explanation was given as to why the request was denied. As I've already noted, I believe that the process was not sufficiently interactive. So, in mid-July, I remained in my existing role. I was looking for new job opportunities within the company. I had learned just a few weeks before that my father had been hospitalized for many months in Texas and that I had no knowledge of that. And I had been in the process of moving. So there was a fair bit of stress in my life. And as someone that has a history of post-traumatic stress disorder, stress can be a very difficult thing to tolerate, depending on how severe the stress is. So, those were the circumstances of the time. At no point into mid-July of 2019 did I ever receive from my on-site supervisor any input suggesting to me that my coworkers had concerns or reservations about my on-site job performance. Allow me to reiterate that. At no point did my on-site supervisor ever share with me via email, phone, or in person any substantial or non-substantial concerns about my work performance as articulated to him by my coworkers. And he himself did not share any concerns that he might have had. So I was under the impression that I was in good standing with the company and that my work performance was appreciated and regarded as at least satisfactory. But what came next led me to think otherwise and to question the integrity of this company, Vinfen Corporation. On Monday, July 15th, my on-site supervisor, whose name I will not share here, was put on leave. He left in the afternoon of Monday, July 15th from the site where I worked. That was the last time I ever saw him. It's also important to note another important aspect of this day. I have noted in the previous video that I worked Memorial Day weekend on Memorial Day, and I worked the 4th of July holiday. I worked on July 4th. As I noted in previous video, I worked these holidays partly because I wanted to demonstrate my commitment to working for this company and my enthusiasm for the mission of this company. Not only did I do that, but I also worked on weekends and evenings. I tried to make myself as available as possible for the work that I did to demonstrate my commitment to the company. And as yet another example of that, I can cite Monday, July 15th as an example. On that day, Monday, July 15th, a day that I was originally scheduled to not work because I customarily was not scheduled to work on Mondays, I worked a 13-and-a-half-hour day. A 13-and-a-half-hour day. How did I end up working a 13-and-a-half-hour day when I wasn't even scheduled to work? Well, it unfolded like this. First, I had agreed to work 2 to 10 p.m., which was a customary shift, 2 to 10 p.m. Then I agreed to come in earlier in the day to provide coverage to a coworker who was at medication administration program training. And then finally, I was then subsequently asked by a night coverage worker, the same coverage worker who later apparently accused me of misconduct that had no basis in reality. I was asked by a night shift worker if I could actually come in at 7 a.m. rather than 8 a.m. like I would have. So instead of being off on Monday, July 15th, I worked from 7 in the morning until 8:30 at night. 13-and-a-half-hour day, because I was that committed to trying to be a good employee of Vinfen Corporation. I found the events of this day further concerning as we, the staff of the house where I worked, were, to my knowledge, given effectively no advance notice regarding our supervisor's suspension. So that day was very distressing to me on many levels. My boss, my immediate boss, was put on leave with no real clarification, no compelling information provided to me or my coworkers as to why he was suspended. And while I do understand the need for confidentiality and the need to protect working relationships, I found it very concerning that the company would do something so, in my opinion, indelicate. And I'm being delicate by saying indelicate. Why they would suspend my boss with no notice and then provide us very little information thereafter was very concerning to me. And then the fact that I worked a 13-and-a-half-hour day when I was off. Those two things made that day particularly difficult to handle. The next day, on July 16th, a Tuesday, I worked at the house, the group home where I worked in the morning, with no second person to assist me because one of my co-workers was again at medication administration program training that morning. That concerned me as well because, again, we were understaffed. On Thursday, July 18th, I emailed this same coworker while she was off of work. I initiated the contact because I was concerned about her ability to get to the group home to help a client who had an early appointment the following day on Friday, July 19th. I actually contacted our supervisor's supervisor, who was actually now working de facto as our immediate supervisor since my supervisor was on suspension. I contacted two people higher up in the company who were basically the group home managers of two different group homes about my concern about the ability of my coworker to take this one client to an appointment the next morning, given the fact that sometimes we were understaffed. Unfortunately, from what I understand, this decision I made to speak to management, the managers of these group homes, about this concern, caused my coworker to become very upset with me. My understanding is that she had an impression for some period of time that I was stepping on toes and doing the work of other people when I was not asked to do so. My understanding of the course of events is that I was doing my job and that I was filling in frequently when things were understaffed, and that I was being generous with my time by repeatedly working hours that I was not initially scheduled to do. I tried to be a supportive coworker. I tried to be understanding. And despite doing that, things unfolded as they did. So, the next day, Friday, July 19th, I took off as my 4th of July holiday. Given how long I had worked for the company, I was permitted to have a day off for the 4th of July holiday, but because I did not actually take the day itself off, I had a day off that I could use. So I took Friday, July 19th off as my day off. I had originally asked my supervisor, not my original supervisor because he was still suspended, I asked my supervisor originally if I could take both the 19th and Saturday the 20th off, as I had been dealing with a lot of stress lately. But I ultimately agreed to come into work on that Saturday, July 20th. On Saturday, July 20th, I first felt disinclined to go to work because I did not feel well in the morning. Ultimately went to work from approximately 4:50 to 9:50 p.m. that evening. And on that day, I also happened to notice that the medication management board, which was used to document when the clients had received their medication, had not been updated since I had left on Thursday, July 18th. This was also a concern of mine because I did not see evidence on the board that the board had been maintained in a timely way, which thus led me to wonder if either people had failed to administer medication to the patients, to the clients, or if they had, but they had just not taken the time to update the board, which takes about 20 seconds at most to erase a dry erase board that is about this large. So on Sunday, July 21st, on a Sunday when I prefer to not be doing anything related to the company because that was one of my days off, I was in touch with my immediate supervisor, namely the supervisor that was in place because my own boss was suspended. I was in touch with them to speak to them to have a meeting on Tuesday, July 23rd in the morning. And I negotiated this meeting time using the Microsoft Outlook email app on my own phone as I was not at work that day. On that day, Sunday, July 21st, I had no idea that on the following day I was to report to work, namely the 23rd, that I was going to be suspended from my position. So, Tuesday, July 23rd came. I received notification I was being suspended from my employment at an 8:30 a.m. meeting with a representative of the Human Resources Office at Vinfen in Hyannis. On that same morning at 10:53 a.m., I emailed a copy of my concerns regarding Vinfen's operations to the two individuals who were present at that 8:30 a.m. meeting, namely the immediate supervisor working at the group home where I worked and a representative from Human Resources. The following day, on Wednesday, July 24th, I was still waiting to receive any sort of document or content advising me of what my rights and responsibilities were, which were specifically applicable to the period of time while I was on an unpaid suspension and being investigated for alleged misconduct. So 24 hours after I was suspended, I still did not have in my possession any sort of content to advise me what my rights and responsibilities were as an employee of this company while I was suspended without pay. This is how this company operated. On Thursday, July 25th, I took my remaining 8 hours of paid personal time. I did this because I needed to continue to receive an income while I was on an unpaid suspension, I should say. And at that point, I then had no leave time left that I was eligible to take after Thursday, July 25th. So the following day, on July 26th, I wrote to another person of the company, and this is a portion of what I wrote. Considering Vinfen was aware of my history of a stress-related health condition as early as late June, I consider it a failure of the company that my needs were overlooked for weeks while I worked diligently to manage my two jobs and address the stress of two family members suffering from serious health concerns. So basically what was happening by late July was I was suspended without pay while I was being investigated in response to allegations that had no credibility. I was stressed because I now had to figure out how I was going to sustain myself financially. I had not too recently learned, or fairly recently learned, that my father had been hospitalized for 4 months. So I was under a lot of stress, and I made the company aware of this. My own supervisor, who was suspended earlier in the month of July, I had informed weeks before of my learning that my father had been hospitalized. My supervisor, before he was suspended, wrote me an email expressing his condolences to me about my father's illness. So he was aware of the amount of stress that I was under. Whether he communicated that higher up the chain of authority in the company, I do not know. To this day, I do not know. And I was expected just to, tolerate that as well. This is what I also wrote on July 26th to a person of influence within Vinfen. I do not feel comfortable coming to a meeting with Human Resources and other people working in management without being able to bring a neutral third party to witness the meeting. I feel this is a reasonable expectation given what I have experienced these last few weeks. That was a portion of what I communicated on July 26th. I underlined it. It was conveyed in an email. I also said, today, 3 days after being suspended, I continue to have increased physical symptoms. I have been documenting them. I have consulted with a healthcare provider about them. I take what has happened these last few weeks very seriously. I continue to be unconvinced that Vinfen takes the matter as seriously as I do. So that is a portion of what I communicated to people within the company on July 26th. On Tuesday, July 30th, my healthcare provider, the one who had made the mistake in providing the ADA paperwork and putting the wrong diagnosis in the paperwork, she provided a corrected statement related to my past request for reasonable accommodation. So what she effectively did was she correctly identified the health condition I had that I had originally wanted to be noted in my paperwork when I requested a reasonable accommodation. On Wednesday, July 31st, I obtained an amended copy of this paperwork at the clinic in Mashpee where I customarily went for care. I then submitted a copy of this paperwork for review at the Hyannis office of Vinfen Corporation on that same day. And the reason that I did that was I wanted to make it clear, one, that I was still interested in remaining an employee of the company. And I also did that because I wanted the record corrected regarding what my concerns were that led me to request a reasonable accommodation. So I did what I could to correct the paperwork and to seek possibly to have the process of requesting a reasonable accommodation be undertaken again possibly so that I could have a more proper determination made. On Friday, August 2nd, I had received at the close of business day no update regarding the status of the investigations being performed that involved me. At that point, I had been suspended without pay for over a week. I had no reliable source of income, and I was becoming distressed about my ability to meet my financial obligations. So when August began, I had been suspended for about 10 days with no pay and had no clarity regarding when the suspension would end and in what circumstances. On Tuesday, August 6th, I set an appointment for a legal consultation with the lawyer that I later hired to represent me before MCAD, the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. That appointment that I set was ultimately set for Friday, August 9th. I later hired my lawyer to represent me in regards to my concerns about how Vinfen Corporation had treated me thus far. On that day, Tuesday, August 6th, another noteworthy event happened that caused me additional distress. I received a phone call with no advance notice from a woman claiming to represent Vinfen, an employee of the company, requesting that I provide information necessary to the assessment of one of the investigations underway involving me. Now, what concerned me about this? There were several concerns. One, I was given no advance notice to expect this phone call. Apparently, Vinfen Corporation just expected that at the moment they called, I would be reachable, that my phone would be turned on, and that I would not have a prior engagement. Well, as it turned out, I did have a prior engagement. I was at a restaurant on Cape Cod with a friend in a public space. So taking a phone call regarding a sensitive matter in which very sensitive information might be requested of me by phone was not really an appropriate expectation because I was out in public already involved in a prior commitment. But I was also concerned due to other aspects of the call. Secondly, I had never heard of this woman before. The woman who called, when she identified herself, her name, I had never heard of her name before. And so she was expecting me, as a suspended employee of this company, who had now at that time been suspended for about 2 weeks, to just trust that she was the person she claimed to be, and that I should take her phone call with no advance notice when I happened to actually already be busy. So that concerned me, that the company expected me to cooperate with a person whose identity I could not verify. In my world, if I'm being asked to provide sensitive information that is of a nature that could impact the lives of more than one person in a very significant way, I don't generally feel comfortable making a phone call to someone or receiving a phone call from someone in which I'm asked to provide such information with no advance notice out in public where other people could hear it. So it concerned me, this incident concerned me in so many ways. It was a phone call with no advance notice being made by a person I'd never heard of, in which I was being asked to provide highly sensitive information about a matter under investigation involving me while I was out in public. So what ultimately happened is I refused to cooperate in the manner requested. I indicated that I was more than willing to go to an office of the company and share information in response to the questions being asked of me, but I was not willing to do it over my own personal cell phone with no advance notice while I was out in public. And I found the call was, I found it outrageous. I wondered if it was possibly something that would fall under the framework of HIPAA, that this could be a HIPAA violation, what I might be asked to disclose over my phone. So I refused to conduct this conversation over phone and offered instead to do it in person. And then I hung up the phone after making it clear my position. The next day, on August 7th, I submitted a formal complaint regarding how I had been treated by Vinfen to the Vice President of Human Resources, Kathy Krisiak. Now, I'm not always going to name names of the people involved, but sometimes I might. So, on August 7th, I submitted a formal complaint regarding how I've been treated by Vinfen to the Vice President of Human Resources, Kathy Krisiak. The strange phone call I received the prior day proved to be the breaking point for me that led me to file this formal complaint. It is important to note here that when the investigations were subsequently ended and I was offered a chance to return to the company to work in a new role, there was never any acknowledgement of the formal complaint that I had made. This, in my opinion, was yet another example of how Vinfen Corporation operations are very sloppy and irresponsible. There was no acknowledgement, no opportunity to discuss the matters of concern that I brought forth in a formal complaint that I had made on August 7th, 2 weeks after I had been suspended from my job without pay. They never, after that date, gave me a space to discuss my concerns as articulated in that complaint statement of August 7th. Never. The following week, on Wednesday, August 14th, I formally retained the services of the lawyer that I had consulted with regarding this matter of my working relationship with Vinfen. During mid-August, I continued to experience heightened physical and mental health symptoms due to the stress of my current circumstances at the time. Some of these symptoms included headaches, GI distress, generalized muscle pain, heightened anxiety, depression, and flashback dream content. Flashbacks are a not uncommon feature of people who have PTSD, who have been recently traumatized, or perhaps who are being re-traumatized due to whatever circumstances they're dealing with in their current lives. So I'm going to basically conclude there as my 30-minute time period is nearly done. This video has been focused specifically on my history in my work relationship with Vinfen from the period of July of 2019 to August of 2019. In the subsequent episodes, I'm going to continue to articulate what unfolded during the remainder of my time employed with Vinfen Corporation. I'm not sure at this point how long it's going to take, how many more videos. I am recording these in 30-minute increments. And allow me to finally conclude this video by saying my purpose once again in this series of videos is to draw attention to the need for a much better healthcare system, not just on Cape Cod and not just in the state of Massachusetts, but in the entire United States of America. Because what I have experienced in my history, in my 47 years of life, transcends and extends beyond the geography of the state of Massachusetts. This involves parties in multiple states over decades. And I have decided to disclose what I have gone through in the hope of protecting myself, my future prospects, and also in the hope that it will inspire some fundamental change based on a heightened understanding of how much people can suffer and lose faith and lose hope due to the dysfunctional issues within the healthcare system of this country. Thank you for watching, and I welcome you to continue to do so.